just when you think the sun's gone and it's nicely cloudy, it comes back again, leaving me in too high a contrast. So let's get this. So this pallet here, that's a bit grubby looking and it's not moving as smoothly as I'd like, so I'm giving that the same treatment that I just gave the retard gear train, flushing that out. Normally on these shutters either the pallet or the wheel will be removable, and so you can get at it and clean easily. This pallet is riveted to this plate and doesn't make for easy cleaning. I could take that plate off and put it through an ultrasonic cleaner, for example. That would certainly work. But I think this will fit the bill. It's just to make sure that if there were any oils or anything around that pallet, it would mean that it wouldn't move quickly. There would be some inertia there when it went to move. And the pallet, as you'll see, rattles backwards and forwards. That's its job, and that times the flash sync mechanism, so that the shutter is released at the right point after the shutter blades make on the M setting. That seems good. And that brings us round to the delay action. The delay action's harder to deal with. It's because there's no easy way to move this backwards and forwards. Just rolling that gently with the tip of a screwdriver, and you want to be gentle, you don't want to damage those teeth. Again, this component could have been removed from the mechanism plate and put through an ultrasonic cleaner. That would certainly be a good option. We'll just do that once more for good measure. This shutter being as clean as it is, it's probably been well cleaned on previous occasions. Alright, that's good enough. Yeah, one way you can clean mechanism plates like this is if you've got a tray filled with naphtha. I remember using a 35mm bulk film tin from Kodak filled with naphtha. That was commonly used for flushing mechanism plates, and you just immerse the whole mechanism plate in it, work the speed trains in the solvent, pull it out, blow off all the excess, and you were good to go. So that certainly works too. Just depends how many tins of solvent you want loose around the workshop, I suppose. There's our mechanism plate. What else has got to go in there? Well, first the blade actuating ring, of course. So the blade actuating ring needs to be cleaned, and normally just the same thing really. Cotton buds, naphtha, cleaning this. This side's got the posts on it, and those posts are the moving pivot for the shutter blades. You can see there's some staining coming off there. That's like oil that's has left those stains. I've seen shutters lubricated in various ways. They are not best left unlubricated. A very tiny smear of graphite grease might work, although it probably means you're going to have to service the shutter more frequently if you do things like that. Dry graphite powder are typically what I use to lubricate components like this that need to move quickly. You don't want any drag or inertia with them. You could probably get away with molybdenum powder if you could find such a stuff. I've just happened to have graphite powder, so that's what I use. I'm just cleaning this retainer plate now. Looking at the state of the cotton bud, it's coming off dirty browny yellow. I would say that means that that's probably old oils that are coming away. Oil, as it ages, tends to lose all its volatiles. Sometimes you're left with like a lacquer. And that lacquer is not necessarily a low friction surface. This is the surface that the shutter blades run against. And it's certainly quite marked. Just trying to make sense of the marking that's on this plate. Often you see fingerprints. I can see fingerprints here and here. This heavier mark over here, I don't really know. It may be a smudged fingerprint, I suppose. Yeah, it is. As I rub that stuff away, as I rub that surface corrosion away, you can see a fingerprint pattern under there, and likewise over here too, I expect. And that's where somebody has held that piece of metal between finger and thumb, probably. And perspiration will do that. It'll just etch into the metal, oxidise it. I'm just rubbing the cotton bud over there to get a sense of how smooth that surface is. I don't think that's going to cause me any problem. If that surface had felt noticeably rough, you certainly can feel it on the end of the cotton bud, and in which case I would probably want to polish that surface with Brasso, which certainly can help. Right, so put that blade actuating ring back into the mechanism plate, and our retaining ring will only go on one way, and I would say that it's this way. Yes, that's it. And it's held in place with 3 screws, one of them being longer than the other. And which was the long... Oh, I did mark where the long one went, did I? No, I didn't. Alright, let's go and have a look at that. This one's a short one, I think. Let's put a short one there. The one by the speed train here, that looks like a long screw would go in there. Let's see. If I'm wrong, it'll be poking out the other side of the mechanism plate, and I'll know that that was not the right move. No, that's good. That's below the surface. That must be in the right choice. That means the other short screw goes over here. Check that the blade actuating ring moves smoothly. It does. We've got it down in the right position, and we haven't got anything caught up in it. And tighten the 3 screws up evenly. One of those screws was loose on here, wasn't it? Oh no, that was the previous shutter I was doing. one of the screws had been loose in that position. So the blade actuating ring looks good. Here we have the lever and its retaining screw, and this lever swings the blade actuating ring backwards and forwards as the lever is swung out or allowed to return to the rest position. So I'm just cleaning that with some naphtha, likewise cleaning the screw to make sure there's no contaminants on it. Typically I lubricate this with a bit of molybdenum paste in the pivot hole and in the slot at the end where it picks up the tab on the blade actuating ring. Drop that into place. And fit the screw in position. Check the action, it swings backwards and forwards. You can see the blade actuating ring swings backwards and forwards with it. I'll hook its return spring back in place. The return spring acts to hold the shutter blades in the closed position. So this would be open, that would be closed. Good, that's all running nice and smoothly. I'll lubricate this plate now with some graphite powder and then clean the shutter blades carefully, put the shutter blades back onto the mechanism plate, and we'll fit the shutter case back over the mechanism plate, put the 4 fixing screws in, we're done. And we can assemble the stuff on top of the mechanism plate. Right, let's give this mechanism plate surface one more clean. You can see fingerprints and marks on the top of that speed train. The shutter blades of course swing out towards the edge of the case, so they're swinging back over this part of the shutter, and so it needs to be smooth. Now that dirty mark is certainly coming away there, it's quite stained. That'll do nicely. I've got a bit of loose graphite powder in here. This is where I normally lubricate pieces like this so that I can recapture the lost graphite really. And all I want to do is just work the mechanism plate backwards and forwards to allow that graphite powder to settle down between the working surfaces, and where they're coming in contact or where it's between the working surfaces, it'll settle on those surfaces, leave a little graphite mark if you like, a lubricated mark, and that'll do the job for me. It means graphite has the advantage that it's dry. It won't attract dust, it won't get sticky over time. Now the retard gear train I need to work on in the same fashion. Typically I just drop a bit of graphite powder onto it, hold back the pallets and work the arm in and out to distribute that graphite powder across. Mostly it's the teeth of the gears. It's the surface of the teeth so that they roll over each other smoothly. I think that's what really happens. It's not the pivots of the wheels that need lubricating. They're typically fine. It's the teeth. The teeth have it's like the surface oxidizes. so that the brass of the teeth, if you like, is not polished and shiny like it once was. It's dull and has probably a roughish finish, and the graphite powder will lubricate that finish. I'm just running this into the retard gear train here, the delay action. That just runs very smoothly, that seems good. Just looking at this. No, I don't need to do anything to the pallet wheel, that's fine. Right, so blow off any excess. Not that that's the end of that, I'll be blowing off excess for a while yet. Unhook my spring, swing the blade actuating ring into the blade open position, and that's ready to have the blades fitted. Of course, I'm getting ahead of myself because I haven't cleaned the blades yet. So I'm going to start, I'll do these one at a time because I've got them laid out in order. I'm just using a bit of naphtha on a cotton bud. As I mentioned, the first and fifth blade have the tip very slightly bent, and that's so that it'll swing over its mate, it's the next blade along smoothly. And this blade went here. Just as with the diaphragm blades, I can make some assessment as to the smoothness or otherwise of these blades by the feel as that cotton bud runs across the surface as I clean them. If it felt rough, I would look closer, and those blades may have to be polished. There are probably some residual marks left on these blades. That's not important, that's strictly cosmetic. Often the marks left on the blades, there's three sorts of marks you get, I'd say. You get corrosion. That's usually fairly obvious when you've got corrosion. That can make the surface rough. The second type would be staining. You get staining from the oil that has previously been on the shutter blades. It may not be present now, it may have been removed a long time ago by a previous technician. But that's oil that had been present has often left a permanent stain. And it's probably a corrosion type product, or it may be like a lacquer left behind by the oil. But it won't dissolve in solvent, and if you want to get rid of it, it has to be polished away. And sometimes, of course, you're dealing with staining that is from oil who is currently present before you took the shutter apart for cleaning, in which case you'll be well aware of where it came from. There we have it, there's our 5 blades in position. Just checking everything's sitting correctly. All the blades are on their pivots. That looks good, and then the case can be lowered over this. Now, there are 4 screw holes here where the case fixes to the mechanism plate, and I'm looking to see the layout of these screw holes. one there, one there, one there, one there. These two are fairly close together. So it'll be these two. Yep. So I'll lower this case on here. Fit my 4 case screws. Just as with the diaphragm, I'm running the screws up, I'm not doing them up tight. I need to make sure that the case went on squarely. More important, I need to make sure that none of the blades were displaced, that they didn't bounce out of position as I put the case over the top, because we don't want a displaced blade being crushed under the case. That should be fine. Let's check the action. That swings in and out fine. I'm just going to put that spring back in place. You can see that action is nice and snappy. No undue resistance. And we can be quite confident that it's nothing in there is gummy with old oils or greases. Shutters that have oil contamination sometimes will work fine in hot weather when the oils are thinned out as a result of the higher temperature, and the components will move quite freely. There may be no apparent and obvious problem. In cold weather, the oils will thicken up or be more viscous and things will stick. So you can often have a shutter that will function perfectly on a hot day, and on a cold morning it just won't go. Or it won't go the first time you go to release the shutter. It might go after a few attempts and then it'll continue to work all day, but first thing on a cold morning it doesn't want to start, like an old car. Right, so far so good. Now I just have to add back the componentry from the top of the mechanism plate here. And there's not much because we didn't take much off here. We've left the retard gear train and the delay action in place. So we just have our flash sync mechanism basically, and flash contact and the shutter release lever. There's not an awful lot more has to go back in here. I'm going to put the flash contact back into the body now. And that just pushes into place in the shutter case. Make sure it's pressed down firmly, and that's held onto the mechanism plate with a single screw. Which in this case is black and brass most likely. Sometimes they're bright brass, this one's not. Now we come to the other exciting stuff. This is the high speed spring, the 1/500th of a second speed. That's what this extra spring provides the power to achieve, or hopes to achieve. Leaf blade shutters very rarely achieve the topped marked speed. They probably didn't even when they were new. The tolerance on shutter speeds was plus or minus 20%, which means that very likely the 500th of a second speed was somewhere close to a 400th of a second in practice, even on a good shutter. So I've just got to get these pieces back in place and sorted out. The 500th of a second speed spring is easily enough dealt with. It needs very little attention. I've just put a tiny smear of molybdenum paste down the centre so that it pivots easily. To be honest, you'd get away with nothing at all there because it's not required to do anything. It's that would certainly fling itself open regardless of lubrication or not. It's quite a powerful little spring. Let's put a smear of molybdenum paste in there. And likewise in the pivot of this piece. And this one has that spring that was exceptionally hard to uncouple. Now I've got to get this coupled to this component, this sector gear coupled to this in the appropriate position, so I've got to work out what the appropriate position is, which means I will probably have to consult my manual back shortly. Here I've printed out the page for the instructions for this shutter, or at least a model very similar to this shutter from the Synchro-Compur service manual, which you can probably find online. It's quite a large PDF. What I was mostly interested in was the relative positions of this lever here and this lever here. So I checked it on the manual. I also went back and checked my video to see how these components sat in the camera as I was disassembling it, and I'm quite confident that I've got those in the right position. So that's certainly a handy guide. The alternative to doing something like this, of course, is what I didn't bother to do in this case, and that's use a compact digital camera to take copious numbers of photos of the works as you take them apart. Each time you go to remove something, take a photo before you remove it, take a photo of the mechanism underneath the part that you've just removed. Taking special note of where springs hook to the various components. Anyway, on to the next part.